Welcome to section 4, lecture 4 of this section, CSS Foundations, Block and Inline. Taking my mark down. Let's go up top. Introduction. In the previous lesson, we discovered that different display types have unique box models, and we can modify the box calculation by changing the display property. CSS has two box types, block and inline boxes, which determine element behavior and interaction. The display property controls how HTML elements appear on the web page. We will explore its various options further in this lesson. So, lessons overview. You will learn about normal flow. You will learn the difference between block and inline elements. You will learn which element defaults to block and which elements default to inline. You will learn what divs and spans are. So let's get right into it. Block versus inline. Most of the elements that you have learned about so far are block elements. In other words, the default style is display block. By default, block elements will appear on the page stacked atop each other, each new element starting on a new line. Inline elements, however, do not start on a new line. They appear in line with whatever elements they are placed beside. A clear example of an inline element is a link or a tag. If you stick one of these in the middle of the paragraph of text, it will behave like a part of the paragraph, like this. So you see this like this link is in the part of the paragraph. The link's text will sit alongside other words in that paragraph. Additionally, padding and margin behave differently on inline elements. In general, you do not want to try to put extra padding on margin or margin on inline elements because you want them to be in line with the other elements. So you don't want to make them too distinct. So let's do it with our developer tools. So this is the A tag, you can see. Now let's do against what they have suggested. So let's try to put a margin of say 20 pixel. So you can see the margin on right and left. So only on right and left, but not on top. So it just puts margin on left and right. Let's also see padding. So I'm putting a padding of 20 pixels. So that's another 20 pixels. So you can see it's on top. It is showing on top that box, and the margin is on two sides. So that's how margin and padding on inline link. The middle ground, inline block. Inline block elements behave like inline elements, but with block style padding and margin. Display inline block is a useful tool to know about, but in practice you'll probably end up reaching for flexbox more often if you try to line up a bunch of boxes. Flexbox will be covered in depth in the next lesson. So instead of inline block, now previously we used to use this inline block a lot. Now after flexbox has become a standard in CSS, we will be using flexbox. Divs and spans. We can't talk about block and inline element without discussing divs and spans. All the other HTML elements we have encountered so far give meaning to their content. For example, paragraph elements tell the browser to display the text in contents as a paragraph. Strong elements tell the browser which texts within are important, and so on. Yet, divs and spans give no particular meaning to their content. They are just generic boxes that can contain anything. So these are just generic boxes. They are just generic boxes. I would want to highlight that. Having elements like this available to us is a lot more useful than it may first appear. We will often need elements that serve no other purpose than to be hook elements. We can give an ID or class to target them for styling with CSS. Another use case we will face regularly is grouping related elements under one parent element to correctly position them on the page. Divs and spans provide us with the ability to do this. Div is a block level element by default. It is commonly used as a container element to group other elements. Div allows us to divide the page into different blocks and display styling to these blocks. So if I want to make this stand out, I can use a span and color this. So span and have a color. What would we learn now? You can put color red. and let it run up to divs and start applying to those blocks. So still here, if I put in my markdown, style is equal to color red, so it doesn't support. Okay, so this markdown will not support the color. If it would support, then we'll be able to see red color on this block. Let's check. So on this pan, if I put color red, that would turn red. But this will not save because this will not show up in a markdown. See the pen block inline lesson div example by the Odin project on CodePen. So you can go to CodePen and check out this example. Span is an inline level element by default. So div is block and span is inline. It can be used to group text content and inline HTML elements for styling and should only be used when no other semantic HTML element is appropriate. So there is also a code page for that. You can check that out. Assignment. The concept of normal flow is implied in the box model resources, but isn't laid out very specifically. Read normal flow from MDN to make sure you understand how elements lay themselves out by default. So here you will come across the display static method, which is display static by default. Let's see if we can see that in our DevTools. So display of static. If you look around, you will be able to see that by default it comes as static. W3 Schools, the W3 Schools article is HTML block and inline elements, a description and a list of all the default block and inline elements. So you can have a list of all block and inline elements. So block level elements, p div block level elements. So these are the block level elements. And then there are list of inline elements. So there's a bunch of, you can get familiar with this, but you don't have to memorize this. The DigitalOcean tutorial inline versus inline block display has a couple of great examples that clarify the difference between inline and inline block. So what is inline block, and what are the properties on each of them? Go to our CSS exercise repository and do the margin and padding 1 and 2 exercises in the margin and padding directory. So try this in CodePen and it will clear out some concepts. Apply what you learned about the box model to improve the look of your recipe page's index.html homepage. Currently it's just a plain list, so get creative with layouts, colors and styles to make your page uniquely captivating. So we'll try to do this together and make this recipe page. So bring your unique flavor to it and try to make it look nice. Now let's check what is the difference between block element and a inline element. Block element will cover the entire width available to it. Inline element will always fall in line with other inline elements. What is the difference between inline element and an inline block element? So this is something you can go over again and get clarity on. Is an H1 block or inline? So when we looked at the lists, here is the list. So I think H1 was block. That's what this showed over there. H1 to H6 are block level elements. So this is fine. Is button block or inline? Button is inline. Is div block or inline? Div is block. Span is block or inline? It is inline. Additional resources. Coming to the additional resources, this tutorial on learnlayout.com is a little dated, but its examples are clear. First 6 slides cover the material we've seen so far. So you can just go through it as an option. Watch this simple short video, it's on YouTube, on what does the term normal flow mean in CSS. Normal flow, whereas display is static. Display is set to static property. For a more interactive explanation and example, try this scrim on block element. So there is a scrim bar and you can look through those. So with that, we will come to the end of block and inline lecture, and next we will take up the box model in CSS. So catch you after a small break.